Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most wild ecological mysteries out there. We're looking at Yellowstone National Park and how it totally transformed after just one single apex predator, the gray wolf, was brought back into its borders. Before 1995, if you walked through certain parts of Yellowstone's northern range, you'd immediately feel like something was missing. Whole stretches of the landscape just felt stripped down. The rivers were wide, shallow, and surprisingly warm. Those rich, dense thickets of young trees, they were inexplicably scarce. It's an incredible story of nature's deep interconnectedness, and it literally revolutionized how we understand ecosystem recovery.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with a huge number, 70. That represents the massive 70-year absence of wolves in Yellowstone. They were completely wiped out from the park by the mid-1920s, and they didn't make a comeback until the winters of 1995 and 1996. For 7 decades, that critical apex predator was missing. Without them, it was like an ecological silence settled over the park, and a vital check and balance system was fundamentally broken. During this incredibly long absence, without their main natural predator, the elk population just grew without any restriction. They basically had free rein to wander and graze wherever they pleased, generation after generation.
When we compare Yellowstone's historically balanced ecosystem to that 70-year absence, the contrast is absolutely mind-blowing. Without wolves, the exploding elk population brought heavy, unchecked grazing. Woody plants like aspen and willow were practically decimated. Because there were just so many elk freely eating year-round, young trees simply couldn't grow tall enough before being devoured. We're talking about an entire generation of trees essentially missing from the landscape. And here's the crazy part. Without those trees, their roots were no longer there to hold the riverbanks together. That led to extensive erosion that actively reshaped the physical geography of the streams.
So, that brings us to a huge, fascinating question. Can the return of a single predator species reshape entire rivers and forests? How could bringing back just one animal to Yellowstone lead to a massive domino effect that ultimately saves whole landscapes from barren overgrazing?
Section 1. The Trophic Cascade, the scientific mechanism of recovery.
Okay, so to understand how the park healed, we need to look at a core definition: the tri-trophic cascade. It sounds complex, but it's a classic ecological theory describing a 3-level system. You've got a predator at the very top, the wolf, impacting the prey in the middle, the elk. By doing so, the predator indirectly saves the plants at the bottom from being heavily overgrazed. Without that top layer, the middle layer just consumes the bottom layer until the ecosystem begins to collapse. But when you pop that apex predator back in, it restores the balance. It's a brilliant chain reaction where the top saves the bottom by controlling the middle.
Now, when we look at the data from the northern range, this ecological theory absolutely comes to life. As the wolf population spiked to near 100 individuals by 2003, the elk population was driven down significantly. We saw elk numbers plummet from over 15,000 down to roughly 6,100 by 2010. That immense biological pressure that had been suffocating the park's vegetation for 70 years was finally lifted.
Section 2. A timeline of recovery. Nature's staggered pace.
Of course, nature doesn't just snap back overnight, right? This passive restoration is a highly methodical, step-by-step process. Because different plants have different ways they interact with their environment, they recovered at a staggered pace. Riparian willows down in the deep snow valley bottoms started bouncing back first, all the way back in 1997. Valley bottoms are super risky for elk because deep snow makes it incredibly difficult to maneuver and escape from wolves. Following the willows, riparian cottonwoods began recovering in 2002, and then riparian aspen by 2006. Finally, by 2010, the recovery had worked its way up the landscape, and upland aspen started growing taller than the browsing reach of elk. Just look at the physical transformation of the landscape over a single decade. It's striking. What were essentially barren upland aspen areas in 2006 rapidly transformed into these thriving, dense thickets by 2010, with trees rocketing past 2 meters in height. At the exact same time, those suppressed, heavily grazed willows from 1997 just exploded into lush, green, structurally complex canopies. The sheer volume of new plant life fundamentally altered the entire look and feel of the park.
Section 3. The ecology of fear. Why behavior matters as much as density.
Here is where things get really fascinating. The recovery of Yellowstone wasn't just about elk populations dropping. It was heavily driven by a concept called the ecology of fear, which proves that prey behavior matters just as much as prey density. Once the wolves returned, the elk were genuinely scared.
That perceived predation risk fundamentally altered their daily habitat use. Imagine being an elk deciding where to forage for the day. Instead of casually wandering into a deep valley bottom or trudging through heavy snow where a wolf pack could easily corner you, you actively avoid those risky areas. You stay on the move. When they do approach tree thickets now, they skirt the edges rather than diving deep inside where visibility is low. By simply scaring the elk out of these vulnerable spaces, the wolves gave those specific areas the breathing room they desperately needed to passively restore.
Section 4. Beavers, bison, and birds, the surprising beneficiaries.
As the trees and rivers began to heal, thanks to fewer elk and that new ecology of fear, a massive ripple effect was triggered. In 1996, the Northern Range had just a single beaver colony. Just one. But by 2009, that number had exploded to 12 colonies. The resurgence of riparian willow plants directly provided the essential building materials and food that beavers desperately needed to thrive. And as they built their dams, they re-engineered the waterways, creating ponds and rich habitats for countless other aquatic species. And the ripple effect extended way beyond the waterways. Bison numbers surged incredibly over this same time period. Summer counts of bison nearly doubled, jumping from a pre-wolf average of 708 all the way to 1,385 between 2001 and 2010. It is such a fascinating dynamic to see how the return of a carnivore could lead to a boom in a massive herbivore. But it makes sense. The shrinking elk population meant there was suddenly significantly less competition for food. There was just so much more herbaceous forage available on the ground for the bison to eat. Even the sky above Yellowstone felt the impact. The returning willows created highly complex, incredibly safe habitats. Complex vegetation provides necessary protection from airborne predators and makes for excellent nesting sites. Because of this, we saw incredible growth in songbird richness, diversity, and relative abundance. Specific species like the yellow warbler, the song sparrow, and the willow flycatcher found newly lush, protective environments to nest in, and it's all directly tied back to the return of the wolves.
So what does this all mean? We've seen the sheer scale of the trophic cascade in just the first 15 years in Yellowstone. If the reintroduction of a single apex predator can heal rivers, save forests, and trigger massive population booms in birds, beavers, and bison, how might this kind of passive restoration reshape other broken environments around the globe? It's a powerful reminder of nature's delicate, brilliant balance. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this leaves you curious to explore even more about our incredibly connected natural world.